Expectations. We all have them. I think one of the greatest unmet expectations, or something that happened that somebody just didn't expect, happened at a Mass when a priest was giving a homily. It was the gospel, and I know you know this one, where Jesus says, if your left eye causes you to sin, tear it out, for it's better you to enter the kingdom of heaven without an eye rather than to not enter at all, right? If your left hand causes you to sin, cut it off. It's better to go to heaven without a hand than not go to heaven at all. The particular priest that was giving the homily had the father of another priest in the diocese sitting in the congregation. What the priest didn't know was that his dad, this other priest's father, actually had a glass eye. And so when the priest started the homily by saying, if your left eye causes you to sin, tear it out, he reached into his eye socket, pulled his eye out, and in the middle of the homily, he held it up to him. Well, that just about ended the priest's homily because he couldn't believe what had happened. Tonight we're gathered to celebrate the Last Supper of Jesus with his disciples. If you've been following the Lenten readings very closely, and I hope you have, you realize that there's sort of a crescendo of what we celebrated last week, right? What's a crescendo? It's a build-up. Things are rising. Jesus has performed miracles. He's raised the dead as he gets closer to Jerusalem. They hail him as the King, the Messiah. They welcome him into Jerusalem. He's about to make this great entry. He's going to turn things over. He literally turns tables over in the temple. He gathers with his disciples, and he does something they don't expect. This king that would be their military ruler and the Messiah takes off his outer garments, grabs a towel, a basin, and a water pitcher, and begins to wash his disciples' feet. Why is he doing that? They didn't understand it. That's what the gospel says, right? You don't understand what I'm doing for you now, but you will. And so Peter, of course, having these expectations, what does he do? When Jesus gets to him, he says, Lord, you will never wash my feet. Why? Because I said that you are the Son of God. I said that you are the Messiah to come. And I have an expectation for you. You're going to be a king. We're going to serve you. And when Jesus says, you will have no inheritance with me, still Peter is thinking, kingship, worldly glory. And so after Jesus says, if I don't wash your feet, Peter, you're not going to have an inheritance with me. Oh, so I'm not going to get the kingship, the royalty, the nice government job. And so when he hears that, what does he say? Oh, well, then give me the deluxe package, Jesus. Not only my feet, but do the hands and my head, and just, if that's what it means by inheritance, I want it all. You see, the people around that table had an expectation, especially of the stories they heard from the Old Testament, of what the Messiah would be. In the Old Testament, it was more of their understanding of God about what they needed to do for God. The Ten Commandments and all of those things, yes, they're binding law still. But tonight at the Last Supper, suddenly the tables have turned. Because for the first time, they began to realize that this is not just about what we do for God. This is about what God wants to do for us. And how does he do things for us? We let him. We let him. The prophets in the Old Testament were always considered the mouthpiece of God. And they must have at some point missed Isaiah 53, the prophecy of the suffering servant. Much more or less, if you read that Psalm, if you read Isaiah 53 and you watch the crucifix while somebody's reading that to you, even 700 years before Christ, you see the cross in that. Jeremiah 36, I will take from you your stony hearts and give you fleshy hearts. I will pour clean water upon you, and I will make your hearts tender like mine. Ezekiel 31, same thing. From all your impurities I will cleanse you. Their expectations were turned around. Ours should be too. Tonight, you're supposed to preach about three things: the institution of the Eucharist, the institution of the priesthood, and fraternal charity. What is the Eucharist really all about? What is it for? You know, I asked the kindergartners that question. Everything that you have in life is for something. I can say, what is this candle for? You're going to tell me to burn, right? To be light, to symbolize something significant. You know, what's this carpet for? I have no idea. But when the church was built, it was meant to be because they wanted to have a mass that had a little more intimacy with what's going on at the altar. And so the tendency was they wanted to make it look more like a sort of a living room. You know, excuse the term, but that was the idea, and they had a good idea about that. What is a book for? To read. What's a hymnal for? For singing. What's a chair for? For sitting. What's the Eucharist for? Eating? You see, what Jesus wanted to do for his apostles tonight in serving them was prepare them for the battle they were about to undergo in evangelization. Because being a friend of Christ, especially in our world today, is not going to always feel good. What's the Eucharist for? It's for strength to live a heavenly life even while we're still on earth. But just like Jesus washing his apostles' feet, it requires us to have an open heart to what the Lord wants to do for us. Having an open heart.